A hospital called saying my wife was dying, but I didn't have a wife. I rushed there anyway, and what I discovered changed my entire life forever. This stranger became my real wife, and today I'm going to tell you exactly how this impossible story unfolded right before my eyes. Picture this. You're at home relaxing after work when your phone rings. The voice on the other end says, "Your wife is in critical condition at the hospital." Your heart stops. But here's the thing. You're not married. You don't have a wife. Yet somehow this hospital has your number listed as the emergency contact for a woman you've never met. That's exactly what happened to me, and I'm about to take you through every single moment of this unbelievable journey. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was watching television, eating leftover pizza, living my normal bachelor life. The nurse on the phone sounded urgent, almost panicked. She told me my wife had been in a severe car accident and was near death. I tried to explain the mistake, but she insisted. She had my name, my phone number, everything matched their records. The woman's name was Sarah Mitchell, and according to their system, I was her husband. I could have hung up. I could have told them to figure out their mistake and left it at that. But something in that nurse's voice made me grab my keys and drive to that hospital. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was concern for whoever this Sarah person was. Or maybe it was something deeper that I couldn't explain at the time. Whatever it was, I got in my car and headed to St. Mary's Medical Center. When I arrived at the hospital, the emergency room was chaotic. Doctors and nurses were rushing everywhere. Machines were beeping, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. I approached the front desk and told them I received a call about Sarah Mitchell. The receptionist looked at me with sympathetic eyes and immediately directed me to the intensive care unit on the 4th floor. She called me Mr. Mitchell. I didn't correct her. I needed to see what this was all about. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. My mind was racing with questions. Who was this woman? Why did she have me listed as her husband? Was this some kind of scam? But what kind of scam involves a real hospital and a woman near death? Nothing made sense, yet I kept moving forward. When the elevator doors opened, a doctor was waiting for me. He introduced himself as Dr. Reynolds and immediately started talking about Sarah's condition. She had multiple injuries from the car accident, internal bleeding, broken ribs, and head trauma. She was in surgery right now, fighting for her life. He asked me questions about her medical history, allergies, any previous conditions. I had to stop him and confess the truth. I didn't know this woman. I wasn't her husband. I had never even heard her name before tonight. Dr. Reynolds looked confused, then concerned. He pulled out a chart and showed me the emergency contact information. There it was, my full name, my phone number, listed as spouse. He asked if perhaps I knew her family, if maybe there was some connection I wasn't remembering. I searched my memory, thinking of everyone I'd ever met, every Sarah I'd ever known. Nothing. This was a complete stranger who had somehow connected her life to mine. The doctor excused himself to make some calls, trying to locate Sarah's actual family or any other contacts. He left me standing in that sterile hallway, completely bewildered. That's when a nurse approached me and asked if I wanted to see her. Sarah was out of surgery now, unconscious but stable. Against every logical thought in my head, I said yes. They led me to a room in the ICU. The woman lying in that hospital bed was covered in bandages, connected to multiple machines, breathing through a ventilator. I stood at the doorway, looking at this complete stranger who had listed me as her husband. She appeared to be in her early 30s, dark hair, pale skin from the trauma and blood loss. I felt an overwhelming sadness wash over me, seeing another human being in such a vulnerable state, even though I had no idea who she was. I pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed. The nurse told me they still hadn't located any family members. Sarah's wallet had been in the car, and my contact information was the only emergency contact they could find. I decided to stay, at least until they found her real family. It seemed wrong to leave her completely alone. Hours passed. I sat there in that quiet room, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, watching her chest rise and fall with the ventilator. Nurses came in and out, checking vitals, adjusting medications. Dr. Reynolds returned and informed me that they had searched every database, called every number they could find. But so far, no family members had been located. He asked if I would consider staying the night, just so Sarah wouldn't be alone if she woke up. Once again, I agreed. That night, sitting in that uncomfortable hospital chair, I started thinking about life in ways I never had before. Here was a woman I didn't know fighting for survival, and somehow I had become the only person by her side. I thought about my own life, how I had been so focused on my career, my routine, my solitary existence. I had friends, sure, but no deep connections, no one who would sit by my hospital bed if I were in Sarah's position. It was a sobering realization. Around 3 a.m, something changed. Sarah's fingers moved slightly. I immediately called for the nurse, who came rushing in with Dr. Reynolds. They checked her responses, and the doctor explained that these were positive signs. She might be waking up soon. My heart started racing. What would I say to her? How would I explain that I was a stranger sitting by her bedside? As the sun started rising, Sarah's eyes slowly opened. She looked confused, disoriented, trying to focus on her surroundings. The medical team immediately began their assessments, asking her questions, checking her responses. When they asked her name, she whispered, "Sarah Mitchell." When they asked if she knew where she was, she managed a small nod. Then Dr. Reynolds gestured toward me and asked if she recognized the man in the room. Sarah's eyes met mine for the first time. I saw confusion, then something else. Recognition. No, that couldn't be right. But there was something in her gaze that made my breath catch. She tried to speak but couldn't quite form the words. The doctor told her to rest, that we could talk more later. But Sarah kept looking at me, tears forming in her eyes. Over the next few days, Sarah's condition improved steadily. She was taken off the ventilator, moved to a regular room, and slowly regained her strength. The hospital staff had finally managed to piece together more of her story through various records. Sarah had no living family. Her parents had passed away years ago in another accident, and she had been an only child. She had been living alone, working as a freelance graphic designer, keeping mostly to herself. What do you think you would do in this situation? Would you stay with a stranger who somehow had your information, or would you walk away once you knew they were safe? Drop your answer in the comments below, because what happened next will surprise you. When Sarah was finally able to speak clearly, I visited her room to get answers. I needed to know why she had my information, how she even knew my name. I sat down beside her bed, and she looked at me with a mixture of embarrassment and something that looked like hope. Then she told me her story, and everything started making sense in the most unexpected way. 2 years ago, Sarah had been going through the darkest period of her life. After losing her parents, she had fallen into deep depression and isolation. She had pushed away friends, quit her job, and barely left her apartment. One day, she had ventured out to a coffee shop, forcing herself to be around people. That's where she saw me for the first time. I was sitting at a corner table working on my laptop, completely unaware of her presence. According to Sarah, I had helped an elderly woman who had dropped her purse, picked up all her belongings, and spent 20 minutes talking with her, making her laugh. Sarah said she sat there watching this simple act of kindness, and something shifted inside her. She saw that there was still goodness in the world, that not everyone was consumed by their own problems. She never approached me that day. She was too anxious, too withdrawn. But she asked the barista if they knew who I was. The barista, who happened to be my neighbor's daughter, mentioned my name and that I was a regular customer. Sarah admitted that over the following weeks she would come to that same coffee shop hoping to see me again. Not to talk to me, just to observe someone who seemed to navigate life with kindness and purpose. It gave her hope during her darkest days. She learned more about me through casual conversations at the coffee shop, never revealing her interest. She found out I worked in software development, that I volunteered at a local community center on weekends, that I had a reputation for being reliable and kind. In her isolated state, she had built up an image of me as someone safe, someone trustworthy. When she needed to fill out emergency contact information for various forms, she had written my name, thinking that if something ever happened to her, maybe this kind stranger would at least ensure she wasn't completely forgotten. Sarah was crying as she told me this. She apologized profusely, explaining how unhealthy and wrong it was. She had been in such a dark mental state, not thinking clearly, desperately clinging to any sense of connection, even if it was imaginary. She said she had planned to change all those forms once she got better, but she had been in the process of rebuilding her life when the accident happened. I sat there absorbing her story. Part of me should have been upset or frightened by this revelation, but instead I felt an overwhelming compassion. Here was someone who had been so broken, so alone, that she had created a phantom connection to a stranger just to feel less isolated in the world. I understood that kind of loneliness, even if I had never admitted it to myself before. I told Sarah I wasn't angry. I told her I understood, and then I did something that surprised both of us. I told her that maybe it was meant to happen this way. Maybe we were both supposed to be in each other's lives. I offered to be her friend, a real one this time, not an imagined connection, but an actual person she could rely on. Sarah looked at me like I had just offered her the world. She couldn't believe I wasn't running away or calling her crazy. I explained that we all deal with pain and loneliness in different ways, and her way had inadvertently brought us together. I chose to see it as an opportunity, rather than something strange or unsettling. Over the following weeks, as Sarah recovered in the hospital, I visited her every single day. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. I learned about her childhood, her dreams of becoming an artist, her struggles after losing her parents. She learned about my life, my career, my own quiet loneliness that I had masked with routine and work. We discovered we had similar tastes in movies, books, and music. We laughed together, shared stories, and slowly built a genuine friendship. The hospital staff noticed the change in both of us. The nurses would smile when I arrived for my daily visits. Dr. Reynolds commented that Sarah's recovery was progressing faster than expected, and he attributed much of it to having support and companionship. I had never realized how much healing could happen simply through human connection. When Sarah was finally discharged from the hospital, she had nowhere to go. Her apartment lease had expired during her hospital stay, and her landlord had already packed up her belongings and put them in storage. She had some money saved, but was still too weak to manage everything alone. Without hesitation, I offered her my guest room. I told her she could stay as long as she needed until she was fully recovered and ready to find a new place. Sarah moved into my home, and life took on a completely different rhythm. My quiet, solitary apartment suddenly had warmth and laughter. We cooked meals together, watched movies, talked late into the night. I helped her with physical therapy exercises, drove her to follow-up appointments, and supported her as she rebuilt her strength. She helped me see my own life differently, encouraged me to pursue hobbies I had abandoned, and brought a lightness to my days that I hadn't realized was missing. Months passed, and Sarah had fully recovered physically. She was working again, taking on graphic design projects, saving money for her own place, but neither of us seemed eager to change our living arrangement. We had become best friends, the kind of companions who understood each other without needing to explain. We had inside jokes, shared routines, and a comfort with each other that felt like coming home. One evening, about 8 months after the accident, we were sitting on my balcony watching the sunset. Sarah turned to me and said something that had been on her mind. She said that when she had written my name as her emergency contact, she had been creating a fantasy of connection. But now, sitting here beside me, she had the real thing. She had a true friend, someone who had chosen to be in her life not because of obligation or circumstance, but because we genuinely cared about each other. I agreed with her, but I also realized I felt something more. Somewhere along this journey, my feelings had deepened beyond friendship. I had fallen in love with Sarah. Not with the stranger in the hospital bed, but with the woman I had come to know through countless conversations, shared meals, quiet moments, and mutual support. I loved her strength, her creativity, her kindness, and the way she had rebuilt herself from such darkness. I told her how I felt that evening. My heart was pounding as the words came out, uncertain how she would respond. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. She admitted she felt the same way. She had fallen in love with the real me, not the imagined version she had created in her loneliness, but the actual person who had shown up day after day, choosing to be present in her life. We started dating, though it felt more like acknowledging what had already been building between us. Our relationship grew naturally from the foundation of deep friendship and mutual respect we had established. We knew each other's flaws, fears, and dreams. We had already weathered crises together. This was different from typical dating. It was two people who had already proven they would show up for each other. A year after the accident, I proposed to Sarah, not because a hospital had mistakenly called me her husband, but because I wanted to actually be her husband. I wanted to choose her every day for the rest of my life, just as she had unknowingly chosen me during her darkest moment. She said yes, without hesitation. We got married in a small ceremony at the same hospital where we had met. Dr. Reynolds and several of the nurses who had cared for Sarah attended. It felt right to celebrate our beginning in the place where our story had started. During our vows, Sarah talked about how sometimes God works in mysterious ways, bringing people together through circumstances we could never predict. She said that what had started as her desperately reaching out in loneliness had become the greatest blessing of her life. I talked about how that phone call had interrupted my comfortable but isolated existence and led me to the love of my life. I had thought I was content alone, but Sarah showed me the difference between contentment and true happiness. She brought color to my black and white world. Now, 2 years after that initial hospital call, we're truly husband and wife. The title that was mistakenly given to me that night has become my reality and my greatest joy. We often talk about how differently things could have gone. I could have ignored that phone call. I could have left the hospital once I realized the mistake. I could have been frightened by her story instead of compassionate. But every choice I made led me to exactly where I was meant to be. Sarah still works as a graphic designer, now from our home office. I still work in software development, but I've cut back my hours to spend more time with my wife. We volunteer together at a local support group for people dealing with loss and isolation, hoping to help others who might be struggling the way Sarah once did. We share our story openly, not because it's conventional, but because it's real and it gives hope to people who feel alone. People often ask Sarah if she regrets putting my name down as her emergency contact all those years ago. She always says no. It was the action of someone who was broken and desperate, yes, but it was also an act of faith. Faith that somewhere out there was someone kind enough to show up, even for a stranger. And I did show up. We both did. Our story isn't typical. It started with confusion, a hospital mistake that wasn't really a mistake, and a woman who had created an imaginary connection because she needed to believe in human goodness. But it became something beautiful and real. It became a marriage built on choice, friendship, and a love that grew from truly knowing each other. Every anniversary we visit that same hospital and bring flowers to the staff who cared for Sarah during those critical days. We thank them for that phone call, for their care, and for being part of our story. Dr. Reynolds always jokes that he's never seen a case quite like ours, where a medical emergency led to a real marriage. The guest room where Sarah first stayed when she moved in is now painted yellow, decorated with her artwork, and serves as her studio space. The balcony where we confessed our feelings is our favorite spot to have morning coffee together. The coffee shop where she first saw me is where we go for date nights, sitting at that same corner table where I once sat alone. Life has a strange way of connecting people who need each other. Sometimes it happens through ordinary circumstances, meeting at work or through mutual friends. Sometimes it happens through extraordinary ones, like a hospital calling the wrong person who turns out to be exactly the right person. Our story is proof that God has a plan we can't always see, that what seems like a mistake can actually be divine intervention. Sarah is no longer the isolated, depressed woman who sat in a coffee shop watching a stranger. She's confident, creative, loved, and surrounded by friends we've made together. I'm no longer the bachelor going through the motions of life without real connection. We transformed each other, not by trying to fix each other, but by simply choosing to show up, to stay, to care. The hospital called saying my wife was near death, but I didn't have a wife. Now I do. She's sitting beside me as I tell this story, still the same woman I sat beside in that ICU room, but also completely different. We're both different. We became the people we were meant to be by finding each other in the most unexpected way. If you had received that phone call, would you have gone to the hospital? Would you have stayed? Would you have opened your heart to someone whose story started in such an unusual way? These are questions I used to wonder about, but now I know my answer. I would do it all again exactly the same way, because every step led me to the love of my life. Our story reminds me that we never know when life is going to change completely. One phone call, one decision to show up, one choice to stay instead of leave, and everything shifts. The person you'll love most in this world might be a complete stranger right now, connected to you in ways you can't yet see. Maybe they're watching you from across a coffee shop, or maybe they're lying in a hospital bed waiting for someone, anyone, to care enough to show up. I showed up for Sarah, but the truth is, she showed up for me too. She showed up in my life when I didn't even know I needed someone. She challenged me to be more compassionate, more present, more open to the unexpected. She taught me that love isn't always a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's a slow sunrise, gradually illuminating everything until you can't imagine life in darkness anymore. We're building a life together now, one day at a time, just like any married couple. We argue about whose turn it is to do the dishes. We binge-watch shows together. We plan vacations and dream about the future. We want to have children someday, to create a family filled with the love we found in each other. Normal, beautiful, ordinary life, built on the foundation of an extraordinary beginning. The hospital called saying my wife was near death. I didn't know her then, but I know her now. I know the sound of her laugh, the way she takes her coffee, the dreams that keep her up at night, and the strength that brought her back from the edge. I know her. I love her. And I'm grateful every single day for that phone call that changed everything. We're truly husband and wife now, not because of a form she filled out in desperation, but because we chose each other, fully and completely, knowing exactly who we were choosing. And that makes all the difference.